I hate myself. Cheers. Hey. Hi, hello. How is everyone doing? I can't take myself serious with these glasses on. How are y'all? It's been a while since I've sat down and filmed a video, but I was feeling inspired. There have been people in my life that have gotten back into the swing of YouTube, and I really just like talking. Recently, one of my favorite YouTubers, Maddie Drogsbeck, did a video rating the books that she read over the past year. And as 2022 is coming to a close, I have reflecting, and I've taken up a new habit of reading, and I read 9 books-ish this year. Most of them were good, but I just wanted to share because reading has become one of my favorite hobbies. So we're gonna start from worst and then get to the best. Be patient with me. The worst book that I read this year was Wicked Pleasure. I cannot tell you how much I hated this book. It was my fault for not doing research. I picked this up at a thrift store and I kind of got it as a joke because I wanted something smutty and it was like $2. Turns out this is like the 9th book in a series, but the series is not, it's not like I could understand this, but it was not, it just didn't. I read some reviews of the author, Laura Lee, online, and people like praise her work a lot, but I honestly thought her writing was, I'll come out and say it, was kind of, I'm a writer myself, and so when I do read, I'm like looking for those things sometimes, and there were like, yes, the like some of the like smutty scenes were like good, they were spicy, but it was so unrealistic, like obnoxiously unrealistic, and don't read it. It's not worth it. Don't read the series. No offense, I'm sure, I hope that this lady is a nice woman, but don't read any of her books. Not worth it. Our next book wasn't so bad. It's called The Anatomy of a Boyfriend by Daria Snedowski. This was like a quick read. I also got this when I bought Wicked Pleasure. And again, I wanted something smutty, just like for like shits and giggles, like funny, haha. This was the most cringy book I've ever read. It was okay, like it wasn't that bad, but it was like so cringe, like so cringe. There was definitely a plot. The plot was okay, but it felt like a 12-year-old's fan fiction that just like was brought into the real world. If you're into that like cringy fan fiction-y like romance, go ahead and read it. But I thought this was gonna be something a little more mature, so if that's not what you're looking for, don't read this one. Now we're kind of getting to the books that I did enjoy. Like I said, there weren't that many books that I didn't like. Next we have Wild Seed by Octavia Butler. So this is a science fiction book. Now my memory is going to be a little rough because I read this very early on in the spring for my English class. And that was a new category, new genre for me. But I was pleasantly surprised. This is also part of a series, and I'm not sure if I'm going to like seek out the other books, but as someone who doesn't read science fiction, I really enjoyed this. She like brings a new light to science fiction in through the lens of women of color, and I really appreciated that, and you could definitely see those themes. So this was a book that I was like discussing with a class and like annotating, like I have all kinds of annotations in this book. And a lot of my classmates didn't like the main character because he's really like rapey and sexist towards women and everything, but you really get to see his character arc throughout the book, which I really appreciated, and I actually found a lot of the scenes that he was in kind of endearing. Moral of the story, you need to read this with like your thinking cap on, and you need to dive deep into it, or else it's really not going to have the same effect. So keep that in mind, but I would definitely recommend this. Okay, now we're getting into the books that I like Like absolutely, absolutely loved. Okay, this book, an American original by Bob Thomas, a must read, a must read. I am a huge Disney nerd, and this is kind of like, you can see how thick it is. This has become like my Bible, basically. And after reading this, I've even gone like, I've become like really almost to the point of like being annoying about like Disney stuff, and God bless that Bob Chapek is gone. If you know, you know. But this is so good. It was definitely something that I had to force myself to read at sometimes, just because like it's a biography. Obviously it wasn't written by Walt Disney, but it's a story of his life and the Disney company, and it goes into a lot of really intense specific details and is kind of reminiscent of the Disney values and artistry. It's one of the many reasons why I love Disney, so I would definitely read this, but it is like kind of like wordy. That's why I had to like force myself to sit down and read it sometimes. But once I, you know, started reading a chapter, I couldn't put it down. Highly recommend if you're into that kind of stuff, or if you're just looking to be inspired. This changed my life. This is The Book of Tea by Okakura Kakuzo. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Oh God, because I do not speak Japanese. I got this early in the year, I think around like February, March. It's at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston when I went there, and it comes in like this little sleeve. Isn't that so cool? It's a hardcover book. I don't own many hardcover books just because they tend to be a little expensive. If you're familiar with the Boston area or the Museum of Fine Arts, Okakura Kakuzo is who the Japanese garden is dedicated to. But this book is kind of a like religious theology, philosophy kind of book. So it's all about teaism. And teaism is kind of like a philosophy, way of life in Japan, all revolving around tea. But they reference Taoism in here, Confucianism, and I'm just like really huge into Eastern philosophy and stuff like that. So this was a really good must read. I do think it was like translated originally from Japanese, so like sometimes the grammar is a little funky fresh, but if you're into that kind of stuff, it really is a must read. I loved tea already as it was, and after reading this, I just had a whole new perspective on the world, and I was pretty enlightened, you could say. Definitely recommend that one. Our next books kind of go hand in hand. I got this book at the thrift store. It is If I Stay by Gail Forman. And it was kind of just like, looks interesting. And I was talking to my friend about it, and she was like, oh my God, there's a movie to this, and I watched and it's really good. I'm like, no way. All I'm gonna say is wow. And there's a sequel to this called Where She Went. And I do find myself liking that book more, only because you kind of need this one for context, but Where She Went, I related to the characters more. In If I Stay, it's basically what happens is her family gets into a car crash, and then she's kind of like floating in between like the conscious physical world and like the spiritual world. And so she's like seeing things from a new perspective and like reflecting on like stories of her past, which was interesting. And it probably like a day or two worth of plot in this whole book, and it stretches out. It's really maybe even less than a day or two. I really enjoyed how emotionally charged these two books were. If I Stay, I will admit, was like pretty graphic. I think Gail Forman has a really good handle on that kind of stuff. So much so that like there were a couple times where I like had to like put the book down and stop reading because I'm like really queasy, and it was intense, but it was like purposeful, and I think that's why it made the writing really good and why I really enjoyed it. Where She Went basically just follows the story of the characters after the incident is resolved. It's more of like a love story. There's like some like spicy scenes in here, not like nothing too intense, but just like young adolescent love, I guess you could say. As a hopeless romantic, it really hits. My last two books are again kind of tied, but for first place, and let me just tell you, I have never experienced anything like this. Now, I got recommended this book by a friend of mine. They were like, you have to read this, like there's 3 books. So I'm still waiting to get my hands on the third one. That is actually the first book I'm planning on reading in 2023. But this is A Dog's Purpose and A Dog's Journey by Bruce Cameron. There are so many things I could say about this book. First of all, I'm gonna be honest, I'm gonna be frank. If you can't handle animals dying, don't read it. Don't read it. Although I will say, even if you can't, maybe still read it, because if you're that emotionally connected to animals, I think even though there is some death, it is worth the read. Because what I kept saying to people after finishing these books was, I never thought that a piece of fiction would make me reevaluate how I see the world and how I interact with animals and human nature. I value those things really highly, and this just really took it to the next level. It's through a dog's perspective, and they go through many lives. Things they learn in previous lives help them in their next lives, and it's just so heartwarming and meaningful. And just Bruce Cameron is such a good writer. Like, I would have never thought to write something through a dog's perspective or through the perspective of something other than a human, but he really does it so effortlessly. And oh man, it truly actually like inspired me to use that point of view in my own writing, I think. And I am so excited to read the third book in the series, A Dog's Promise. After A Dog's Purpose, there's A Dog's Journey. And I do think that I enjoyed A Dog's Journey more. I think that's my top book for the year, because in a similar sense to the Gail Forman books, A Dog's Purpose kind of gives you a lot of context and kind of like sets up the character itself. And in A Dog's Journey, you really get to see pretty much one story drawn out through the whole book. I related more to those characters because the main character, Human, is a teenage girl. There are definitely like values that I see in her that I notice in myself, and just kind of the themes of the book were more relatable because A Dog's Purpose kind of like jumped all over the place. I'm really excited to read Dog's Promise because that kind of takes place after the plot of A Dog's Journey is resolved. I'm not sure really how that book is gonna go, but I think it should be interesting because Bruce Cameron's a really good writer. Those are all the books that I read in 2022. I am just really so grateful and proud of myself that I took up reading as a hobby. I used to be really like anti-books, anti-reading. I'm trying to like steer myself away from like watching TV and films all the time, just because it like can really consume my life. But what's kind of ironic about that is now I'm consumed by reading, which I guess isn't like the worst habit to have, but is also like feeding my procrastination, which I was trying to like avoid. So, oops. Okay. Glasses are going back on. I actually have a book list for 2023. My goal is to read at least one book every month. So first on my list is A Dog's Promise, like I talked about. Some of the other books I want to read are Falling for Korea by Piper Jean and Mira by Gia Lukeman. I saw advertisements for both of these books on TikTok, and I thought they were both really interesting, and I found them on Amazon and, you know, read like a couple pages, and the writing is pretty good for someone that's like, I believe they're both self-published. I also really want to read Crying in H Mart, and not to be like that girl because everyone talks about that book, but I really do think that I'm going to like it just based on the themes that it covers. I'd also like to read The Help by Catherine Stockett and Memoirs of a Geisha by Arthur Golden. I kind of want to start delving into some like historical fiction stuff, and I've actually seen the film adaptation to both of these actually, and really fell in love with those stories. I would also like to read or finish the Chaos Walking series by Patrick Ness. Last year I read The Knife of Never Letting Go, so this year I really want to finish that series up by reading The Ask and the Answer and Monsters of Men. Yeah, so I'm excited for what 2023 is gonna hold. I hope that if reading is not your hobby, that maybe it becomes your hobby. And I've said it once and I'll say it again, just find the little things in life that bring you joy. I know this pandemic has really put a wrench in everyone's plans and everyone's mindsets, but breathe, take it easy, be gentle to yourself, be kind to yourself, and hopefully I will see you soon. Alrighty, bye.